This episode brought to you by Cafe Imports, Minneapolis-based importers of fine specialty green coffees. Independently owned and operated since 1993, Cafe Imports has been dedicated to decreasing its impact on the earth through renewable energy, carbon neutrality, and by supporting conservational efforts in places where quality coffee is grown and also where quality coffee is consumed. Where does your coffee come from?
And by the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. As a nonprofit, we rely on support from listeners like you. If you like what you hear, please consider a donation. To learn more and make a gift, visit us at www.gosuperior.org.
Welcome to the Lake Superior Podcast. I'm Walt Lindala.
And I'm Frida Waara. We are made stronger by story, and there's no better source than the continent's largest body of fresh water, Lake Superior.
So join us as we highlight the 5 national parks that ring this greatest of the Great Lakes, meet the people, tour the places, and learn about the projects that make these parks and body of water so remarkable.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
I'm Walt Lindala.
And I'm Frida Waara.
Welcome once again to the Lake Superior Podcast. Today, Frida, I think something that's got some really good wide-ranging appeal because it talks about one of the biggest parts of the Great Lakes, and especially Lake Superior, is shipping and boats out on the lakes and everything. Tell me a little bit about who we've got set up here.
Well, you know, since 1855, the lakes have been very active. There were always ships moving around, but when the sulaks came in, that's when it really came to be a major industry for so many of their ports along the lake. And
absolutely.
You have it happen to you, Walt. You get up in the middle of the night or whatever, you look out at the lake and, whoa, there are ships moving all the time.
That's right. And that's a big part of with not only Lake Superior, but parts of that, like for myself growing up on Portage Lake in the Keweenaw, back in the day, that was a refuge. And it is occasionally when things get really heavy for the ore boats and such that were working their way across. But what we're going to talk about here a little bit is shipping on the lakes, the large vessels that we see. And we're going to talk about it with Sam Hankinson, who is development coordinator with the Port of Monroe. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You know, we're looking forward to this chat here and everything, but tell us a little bit about when I see development coordinator, Port of Monroe, what does that mean, what you do, Sam, and then kind of what led you to your work on the Great Lakes?
Yes, absolutely. So I work for a port authority in Monroe, Michigan. We are located just south of Detroit and north of Toledo on Lake Erie, and we have a pretty small staff at our port, and so my day-to-day activities include researching and pursuing different cargo opportunities. As a port, we make money off of moving cargo, whether that is transferring it from a vessel to a rail car, truck to a vessel, or any of those other intermodal transfers. And so I research different cargo opportunities for our port to pursue, and I also work with our larger staff to develop new infrastructure solutions. Right now, our port has over $30 million in state and federal grant money right now, so we'll be working on developing new infrastructure at our port. And as a small port, I am ready to assist in whatever else we have going on, whether that is helping out with vessel operations. We just had a barge in this morning loading bottom ash, which is a byproduct of the coal burning process, and we're sending that to Alpena, Michigan, where it is going into cement mix. So it really just depends. You have to be ready for anything when you work on the Great Lakes.
You know, Sam, we see trucks moving on our highways and trains crossing our country, but what do you tell people about your job as far as how much is being shipped on the Great Lakes?
Yes, absolutely. I like to talk about how it is very easy to see the amount of freight moving within our country when you get on the highway and you see all the trucks, or when you're stopped at a railroad crossing and you see these huge trains of containers moving through our towns, but it really is hard to quantify how much cargo these vessels are moving. In just one trip, a 1,000-foot Great Lakes freighter, which has a carrying capacity of 70,000 tons, can haul the same amount of cargo as 700 rail cars or 2,800 trucks, which is just amazing. But not everybody is able to go to the locations to see these ships going by, and it's hard to educate people on what these ships are carrying. These vessels are carrying the iron ore that's going into steel making. They're carrying coal that helps put our lights on. They're hauling grain, which puts food on our tables. They're hauling the stone that goes into our roads. They're doing everything. They're carrying the building blocks of America, and that's such a cool story. But it is a story that we need to tell more people, and more people need to be aware of.
Well, that's why we have you on here today to kind of share this story, because we see them here on Lake Superior all the time. But of course, it's a network of the lakes.
And is this correct? Are there 13,000 footers right now moving around the Great Lakes?
Yeah, that's correct. There's 13 ships that are either exactly 1,000 feet or just a bit over 1,000 feet sailing on the Great Lakes today.
And why can we not have anything larger?
We don't have anything larger because of the size of the locks at Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And when the pole lock was built, that created the boom in 1,000-foot freighters, and it prompted shipping companies to build larger vessels. And these 1,000-foot ships, they are very good at hauling a lot of cargo across the Great Lakes, long distances. But these 1,000-foot ships, they can only go to a select few ports because not every port on the Great Lakes has the docks and infrastructure necessary to accommodate these big ships. So when you look at a 1,000-foot freighter, it can go up to Duluth, Minnesota, and take on a load of iron ore and deliver that to Cleveland, but it can't go the full way up the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland and deliver it directly to the steel mill that's at the head of navigation on the Cuyahoga River. These 1,000-foot ships, they have to drop off their iron ore at the riverfront, at the lakefront in Cleveland, and then that's reloaded onto a smaller ship, which delivers it to the final destination.
Yeah, they are impressive vessels when you see them. Do you have any idea, Sam, of on the Great Lakes, how many ships are out there, what they're hauling during the season?
Yeah, so on the Great Lakes, we have our existing domestic fleet, which is made up of both United States and Canadian flagged vessels. And we also have a number of saltwater vessels that come into the Great Lakes during the normal shipping season. So your domestic ships, they are the ones hauling the iron ore from the upper lakes to steel mills. The Canadian boats, they will haul iron ore out of the Great Lakes to Montreal, to Quebec City, where it's unloaded and reloaded onto larger vessels that take it to other international ports. Grain is a big cargo that's moved out of the seaway. Potash is railed from different mines in Canada to Thunder Bay, Ontario, where it's exported to ports around the world. And something that I want to talk about that might be interesting that not a lot of people know about is a lot of these saltwater ships, they bring into the Great Lakes what's called project cargo. So that is the wind towers and the big pieces of machinery that you see. And what those are is they're destined for a project site. So a wind developer will bring in a lot of wind towers by vessel because it's a lot more efficient to move these wind towers on a ship than it is to put them on a road. Because if you were trying to get from point A to point B on the road and there were a ton of trucks with wind towers on the road, that wouldn't be very efficient for anybody. So you have these project pieces coming in on vessels, and it's a lot easier to move them by ship. But these project pieces are what new facilities are dependent on. So, like a new electric vehicle plant for an automotive manufacturer, or a different stamping company who provides to the automotive industry, and they need new project pieces like a new machine, and that's what these ships are carrying. And it's very interesting because that's some of the cargo that my port is researching right now because of where we're located in Southeast Michigan, Metro Detroit, where there's a lot of automotive facilities.
Fascinating, just fascinating. Any idea then, when you look at all this product being moved, how many ships are out there during the season?
Yeah, it's really a range of vessels on the Great Lakes. Of course, we talked about there being 13,000-foot freighters on the Great Lakes. And the Canadian fleets, the big fleets, are Algoma Central and Canada Steamship Lines, and they've got around 15 to 20 vessels in their fleet. And then you've got, of course, Rand Logistics, which consists of American Steamship Company, Grand River Navigation, and Lower Lakes Transportation. They have about 20 vessels in their fleet. And then you have Interlake Steamship Company, who's got a fleet of about 10 vessels. And Great Lakes Fleet, which is based out of Duluth and has a fleet of about 6 or 7 active vessels. But don't have those numbers directly in front of me, so those are just rough estimates. But the fleet on the Great Lakes between the United States and Canada is very strong and very well supported.
And very active, too. We're talking with Sam Hankinson today. He's development coordinator with the Port of Monroe. We're talking about shipping on the Great Lakes, shipping on Lake Superior. A lot of these vessels we're talking about, these companies you're talking about, if you're familiar with Lake Superior, you've seen these. If you're familiar with the Great Lakes, you see a lot of them because it is a big network. It is a big shipping area. What about, like, when we look at the ships, do you have any ballpark idea maybe which one is the longest serving one that is out there, maybe one that is also the newest? I mean, do you have any info on that, just out of curiosity?
Yes. So the oldest powered vessel on the Great Lakes is the steamer Alpina, and she was built in 1942 as a bulk carrier. She was converted to a cement carrier, and she runs out of her namesake port, Alpena, Michigan, where there is a large cement plant. Lafarge Holcim owns that plant, and she hauls powdered cement mix to terminals around the Great Lakes. And she does it very well. She's relatively rare on Lake Superior. Maybe once or twice a year she will make a trip up to Duluth and unload at a facility in Superior, Wisconsin. But that trade route is served by some of her more efficient tug barge fleet mates. The oldest vessel on the Great Lakes is the St. Mary's Challenger. She was built in 1906 as a bulk carrier, but she was cut down to a barge in 2014. So when she lost her propulsion during the conversion, you kind of move that to a different distinction when you're talking about old vessels on the Great Lakes, because it is now serving on the Great Lakes in a different form. The newest vessel on the Great Lakes on the American side is the Mark W. Barker, which was built by Interlake Steamship Company in 2022. I got to go to the christening of that vessel in Cleveland, which was an amazing event to see because, you know, I've read so much about vessels when I've grown up. I grew up in Grand Haven, Michigan, on Lake Michigan. So I got to see a lot of ships coming in to my hometown. But, you know, you read about these ships and you read about christenings, and it was so cool to actually get to go to one and watch the bottle being broken on a new American-flagged Great Lakes freighter. It was so amazing to be a part of that. But the newest vessel on the Great Lakes is the Algoma Bear, which is the newest vessel in the Algoma Central Fleet, a Canadian vessel. And she just came to the lakes a couple weeks ago, actually, from a shipyard in China, and now she's in regular service for Algoma. She's been pretty frequent through the Sulaks the last few weeks, hauling iron ore from Two Harbors, Minnesota, to a steel mill in Nanticoke, Ontario.
How often does a new ship get added to the fleet? So we got 2022 and then 2024, and then I'm also wondering, what's the price tag on these babies?
Yeah, It's definitely not cheap. I can't speak to the price tag, but it really depends. It's not a regular occurrence to have new vessels added to the fleet. And when I talk about the Mark Barker and the Algoma Bear, those new vessels are serving kind of different purposes for their respective fleets. So in the case of the Mark Barker, that was a fleet expansion, while the Algoma Bear is part of a fleet renewal. So if a company were to secure a new contract, which is a specific amount of tonnage to haul cargo from one location to another, every ship in their fleet has a specific carrying capacity, and they can make a specific amount of trips per year. So these big 1,000-footers that we've talked about, they're very good at hauling cargo long distances, but they make less trips per year. The smaller ships haul less cargo per trip, but they can make more trips per year because there's more harbors that they can go into and they can make shorter trips. So if a company has a new opportunity to haul a specific amount of cargo per year, say with a new company that they've cultivated a relationship with, they would look at their existing fleet and evaluate if they can deliver that cargo commitment with their existing fleet or if a new investment would need to be made. So in the case of the Mark Barker, she was built as a result of a new contract between her owner, Interlake Steamship, and Cargill to haul salt out of Cargill's facility in Cleveland. So the Mark Barker has special coatings in its cargo hold where it is more capable than maybe other vessels that don't have these coatings to haul salt. And then the Algoma Bear is part of Algoma's massive fleet renewal program to build new ships to replace existing vessels in the fleet. So since 2010, Algoma has invested nearly $600 million in 11 new ships to operate in its Canadian fleet. So these are self-unloading vessels that are able to discharge their own cargo with a deck-mounted boom, and also bulk carriers that have to utilize shoreside infrastructure to unload them. So this is not new business. This is purely fleet renewal for Algoma. So they have been able to completely renew their fleet and retire old vessels and replace them with new, more modern vessels. Now, Canadian fleets are able to build their ships in overseas shipyards like in China or Croatia, while U.S. ships like the Mark Barker have to be built to the requirements of the Jones Act, which dictates ships involved in U.S. trade between U.S. ports have to be built in the U.S., owned by a U.S. company, and crewed by U.S. mariners. So there's a bit of a difference between some of the companies operating on the Great Lakes, but it's very exciting to talk about companies that have a history on the Great Lakes investing in their fleets and building new assets, whether that's for new business or existing business.
And it sounds like that is a reflection of the industry in and of itself, the shipping industry being fairly healthy. We're talking with Sam Hankinson today. He is Development Coordinator, Port of Monroe. Sam, I'd like to shift a little bit into the history here. Of course, many of us that are fans of the Great Lakes, and we also, those of Lake Superior, know the story of the loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It's a classic, well-known story in November of 1975, loss of all 29 hands on deck on Lake Superior. That's very well known. Has there been a fatality on the Great Lakes since then related to shipping and a vessel going down or something along those lines? Or has that been kind of the last one?
Yeah, so the last major wreck on the Great Lakes was indeed the Edmund Fitzgerald. We have had incidents of vessels sinking that sail on the Great Lakes, but these incidents did not happen on the Great Lakes. So in 2009, we lost the Canadian-flagged Algoport. This was one of the vessels in the Algoma Central Fleet. It was being towed to China for a four-body replacement. So what they were going to do was chop off the front end of the ship, the cargo section, and replace that with a new section and mate that to the stern of the vessel where the propulsion unit was. Anyway, it was being towed by a tug, and they encountered some bad weather in the South China Sea, I believe, and the Algo port broke in half and sank. So the forebody that was supposed to go in the Algo port was completed with a new stern section and became a new ship called the Algoma Mariner, which currently sails on the Great Lakes. Mm-hmm. And then in 2011, we had the old Canadian Miner, formerly of the Upper Lakes Fleet. This was another Canadian vessel. It was actually being towed to scrap in September of 2011, and it ran into significant weather out in the Gulf of St. Lawrence area. The tow line broke, and the ship ran up on an island, and it took 3 years to salvage the vessel and completely dispose of it. So no major incidents have happened on the Great Lakes, but definitely incidents involving vessels that sail on our Great Lakes.
Well, that ties into obviously something that we want to talk about from a little bit more recent past. In June of this year of 2024, the Michipicoten, a Canadian ship, ended up originally reported having struck something, but they found out that there was a stress crack, a fracture in the hull. It was towed into or ran into Thunder Bay on its own power for being looked at now. But let's talk about that a little bit. When we heard about this, I know when I heard about it, and a lot of my friends heard about it, that one of these vessels was out there somewhere and started taking on water and had a list. All of our eyebrows went up because this isn't something that we hear about a lot with all of these vessels. And let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, what did this mean when this kind of came through? What did you guys think when you were at the port there when you heard about it?
Yeah, absolutely. This occurred on a Saturday morning, and I woke up, and within 30 minutes I was starting to get texts about this. And any developing story, regardless of whether it's about shipping or something else, is very interesting to follow because you have a small amount of information when you start, and then as the situation unfolds, you get more information. So to hear that the vessel was taking on water, of course, was very concerning because you can get on marine traffic and look where the vessel is and be able to say, wow, that's not a great spot to start taking on water. Mm-hmm. But I was very concerned for the crew on the vessel. And of course, we can talk about it in a different light because everybody got to port safe. Everybody on that vessel was safe. And so what I really would like to talk about when we talk about what happened with the Michipicoten was the response to the vessel.
Correct. Yeah.
When we talk about the Edmund Fitzgerald, we always talk about the Arthur M. Anderson and Captain Bernie Cooper going back out into the storm. That morning on Lake Superior, the 1,000-footer Edwin H. Gott responded to the Michipicoten. You had other vessels hauling out of Duluth to try and provide aid. The Coast Guard cutter Spar, which eventually was stood down. But you had multiple helicopters from the United States Coast Guard. You had small boats responding to the ship. And that really, in a nutshell, is our culture here on the Great Lakes. These vessels they exist to move cargo. People make their livelihoods on the Great Lakes. But when stuff goes wrong and people are in danger, our industry stands up, our community stands up to respond to our fellow mariners. And I'm so incredibly proud of the response to the vessel and making sure that everybody was able to go home that day. And so it's an interesting topic to talk about now that it's over. And it sounds like the Michipicoten will be repaired, but we'll just have to see what happens.
How old was that ship?
The Michipicoten was built in 1952. She operated as a straight deck bulk carrier until 1980 when she was converted to a self-unloader. And this is when she was the Elton Hoyt II for Interlake Steamship Company. She was an American flagged vessel. And it was laid up for a number of years. And in 2003, it was sold Canadian and re-entered service as the Michipicoten. And this ship is very common on Lake Superior. She primarily hauls iron ore to Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. She's a frequent caller to Marquette. She's frequent in Duluth and Two Harbors to the iron ore docks there. So for this to happen to any vessel, for it to happen to the Mishpachatan. That is a very significant Lake Superior vessel. She's very, very common on Lake Superior, sailing back and forth between the iron ore mines and the ore docks to the steel mill in the Sioux.
Sam, just doing some quick math. I mean, if we had a 70-year-old truck, we would probably question the reliability. How is the ship different, and are they inspected regularly?
Yeah, so ships are inspected regularly on the Great Lakes. Every 5 years, they are required to have intensive dry dockings, which is called a 5-year survey. So you get the vessel out of the water and you make sure everything looks good. Then you do steel replacement and other maintenance and things like that. But when the locks close in January, all the vessels on the Great Lakes, save for a few that are running important materials like salt and liquid bulk, they go to layup, what's called winter layup. And these ships, they shack up in ports like Superior, Wisconsin, Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, Toledo, Ohio, where there are shipyard and maintenance facilities. And these winter crews do regular work on these ships, and they do the steel replacement, and they make sure everything is looking good so that the vessels are ready to rock when the locks open in March. And this is a very critical period, of course. We like the part of the year where the ships are sailing and we can look out on the lake and see the lights of the boats at night. But the winter layup period, when everything is quiet, is a very important time as well, because down on the docks where the ships are resting for the winter and their crews are home with their families, there is still work being done to prepare them for the next season and the seasons beyond. So, there are a lot of very old vessels on the Great Lakes, and the freshwater really preserves the hulls of these ships longer than if they were to sail on salt water. Now, the Canadian vessels, they frequently have to transit the locks of the Welland Canal and the St. Lawrence Seaway frequently, and they also run out on salt water. So those ships take a beating more than the U.S. vessels do, because not a lot of U.S. vessels travel past Lake Ontario. But with the proper maintenance and care, a Great Lakes vessel can last a really long time. I talked about two ships earlier, the Alpena and the St. Mary's Challenger, that are incredibly old ships on the Great Lakes, the St. Mary's Challenger being over 100 years old. And you get to sail a 100-year-old vessel on the Great Lakes by taking very good care of it.
So we are talking with Sam Hankinson here today, Development Coordinator, Port of Monroe. You touched on the shipping season. Obviously, we can hear that there is a reason for shutting the shipping season down to do maintenance and such. But what about weather as a factor? Why do we have a shipping shutdown per se? What are the driving reasons for that?
Yeah, absolutely. It really boils down to that critical maintenance period, because our locks in Sault Ste. Marie and the locks of the Welland Canal and St. Lawrence Seaway, that is when they go down in addition to the vessels for critical maintenance. So the thing that I like to compare our system to, which has a season and an off season, is these large coastal ports where we see these massive container ships coming in. And we've all seen the news articles about the congestion at coastal ports, and we saw what happened when the container vessel grounded in the Suez Canal and clogged everything. And really, our system is incredibly reliable. And yes, we close for the winter, but we close for the winter to ensure the reliability of our system during that normal shipping season. So these locks come offline, and we do critical maintenance on them to make sure that when we open for the season, we are not causing vessel owners and pilots and vessel crews delays when they come into the Great Lakes, because that would really damage our reputation. So as compared to a coastal port where you might have to wait at anchor for a certain amount of days, and then you wait at a berth for a certain amount of days, and then it takes a certain amount of days on top of that to get your container out of the port, get your container into the heartland of America, whether it is a container cargo or a bulk cargo. There really is an unreliability to coastal ports. And of course, all those ports are working on that. But really, we try to advertise the Great Lakes as a congestion-free solution into the heartland of America, and we do that by bringing the locks offline in the wintertime. So winter navigation has been tried on the Great Lakes before, but it really just puts too much stress, and it takes a beating on the vessels, and especially the crews too. If you're the only ship sailing on the Great Lakes into January, February, that's really not a fun place to be in when all the other ships are laid up for the wintertime. And so it's a morale thing as well for the crews that are ready to go home and spend time with their families. And so, yes, we've had some mild winters lately, but this maintenance period is scheduled, and it will always continue to have this rotation until something outside of our control would change that.
Sam, I feel like we've really, and especially on the tails of that last comment, the tip of the iceberg here. How can people learn more about shipping on the Great Lakes? There's got to be resources out there.
There are absolutely resources about Great Lakes shipping, and that is how I was able to get into this hobby and also take my passion for this industry and turn it into a career. When I was growing up, the resources that were important to me were the local newspaper column in the Grand Haven Tribune called the Ship's Log. And for me, that was how I started to learn about the vessels, and that was written by a gentleman named Dick Fox, who was one of my original mentors. And I also got connected with important resources like Know Your Ships, which is an annual publication about the vessels on the Great Lakes, and boatnerd.com. Now, I am very fortunate to be a part of the Know Your Ships crew today. It is published by a gentleman named Roger Lelever. I highly recommend that you check out you check out the book and get a copy of it. And so, yes, there are no shortage of resources available for people if you are looking to get into the hobby of watching ships. But I would also say there is nothing wrong with traveling to a place like Duluth, Marquette, or Sault Ste. Marie and just sitting down by the water and waiting for the boats to go by and enjoying it at your own speed. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And moments like that are the moments that I enjoy the most. I was fortunate enough to be up in Sault Ste. Marie last week for Engineers Day, which is always the last Friday in June, when the Army Corps of Engineers opened up the locks to the public. So I got to sit inside the Sioux locks between the Poe lock and the MacArthur lock, and I got to see the Wilfred Sykes lock through and the 1,000-footer Stuart J. Court, and enjoy it with new friends and old friends, and it's just such a special experience. So the Lake Superior area holds a special place in my heart, and I have not spent enough time up there as I have liked to chasing boats, but I hope I will be able to in the future.
Sam, it's been a pleasure having you on here today. We like to talk to people on the podcast that are passionate about these topics tied to Lake Superior and the Great Lakes, and it really has come across in your voice, and we do appreciate you sharing your insight. I'm sure that there's even more. Maybe we'll pick up another one of these again sometime with you, but man, it's just, because we're recording in Marquette, Michigan. Marquette, Michigan is one of the ports you mentioned. The Michipicoten was here on a regular basis. A lot of these vessels you're talking about. But it is really nice to have had this chat with you to just hear what some of your thoughts are. I could tell you're really into this nicely.
Yes, absolutely. And as I mentioned, I am from Grand Haven, Michigan, on the west side of Michigan. I currently work on the east side of Michigan. My happy place is in Sault Ste. Marie in the Upper Peninsula. I have a lot of friends all over the Great Lakes, and any place that I can be in the Great Lakes region on the water feels like home to me. And it is just a very special thing, and it's hard to communicate to people that this entire region really has that home feeling to it, because the ships sail to a lot of different places, and as you track them, you start to get to know people in all the different ports, and it really is it's a very welcoming community that is very special to me.
Sam, speaking of that tracking, so I'm kind of an insomniac. I'm living on the south shore of Lake Superior and Marquette. Is there a place I can go, a website that will show me when I look out my window and I see something out there that I might be able to say what ship that could be?
Yes, absolutely. So you can use the app Marine Traffic, which is what I use and my friends use, and even other ports and people on the ships to see where vessels are around your area. And you used to have newspapers and websites posting vessel schedules, but vessel schedules change all the time. Mm-hmm. And so everybody, the public will ask in different ports, is there a shipping schedule? What's the schedule? When are the ships going to be here? The easiest thing to do is download Marine Traffic or another vessel tracking app and see if there are any ships in your area. And once you start tracking them, you will get it down to a science of how far away they are, when they're going to show up, and when the next one will be coming by.
Sam Hankinson joining us here on the Lake Superior Podcast, Development Coordinator for the Port of Monroe. Sir, thanks for your time. It has been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we can talk again soon. That's
Sam Hankinson, Development Coordinator with the Port of Monroe. Frida, a lot of information there. Yeah, as I said, it's like we like to talk to folks that are passionate about the stuff that they're into. Definitely the case for Sam. And I learned a lot as someone that's grown up on Lake Superior and grown up on Portage Lake and seeing a lot of these boats for some time.
Well, just last night I was riding my bike from home out around the island, came back. There was a ship being loaded with iron ore, and we see the trains go by, of course, and just watching that operation. Now you can bet I'm going to download that Marine Traffic app that Sam was talking about, just so I know, yeah, that is the whatever out there. And boy, just to understand that a 70-year-old ship, it's not like a 70-year-old truck.
No.
And the Great Lakes is a different body of water for these ships. So fascinating, fascinating.
It is real interesting how it all ties in, because we talk a lot about the Lake Superior experience here on the podcast, but that is the greatest of the Great Lakes. But these vessels are on a network, and Sam shared some really good information with us, and we appreciate his time. Now, if there's something that you out there would like to hear on the podcast, get a hold of us through the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation website, or wherever you get this podcast. Send us an idea. Let Frida and I know what might be something cool you want to hear about. We'll look into it, and we'll see what we can do for a future podcast. And of course, you can always find out more by visiting the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation website. That's going to do it for us this time around on the Lake Superior Podcast. I'm Walt Lindala.
I'm Frida Waara. Thanks for listening. The National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation, NPLSF, is the only official nonprofit 501c3 fundraising partner of the National Park Service for all 5 U.S. National Park sites on Lake Superior.
To learn more about NPLSF projects and programs, you can visit the website at nplsf.org or friend them on Facebook.
I'm Frida Waara.
And I'm Walt Lindala. Thanks for listening to the Lake Superior Podcast.
This podcast made possible with the support of the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation and Media Brew Communications.
This episode brought to you by Cafe Imports, Minneapolis-based importers of fine specialty green coffees. Independently owned and operated since 1993, Cafe Imports has been dedicated to decreasing its impact on the earth through renewable energy, carbon neutrality, and by supporting conservational efforts in places where quality coffee is grown and also where quality coffee is consumed. Where does your coffee come from?
And by the National Parks of Lake Superior Foundation. As a nonprofit, we rely on support from listeners like you. If you like what you hear, please consider a donation. To learn more and make a gift, visit us at www.gosuperior.org.